In other news today, the Golden Arrow bus service in Cape Town has confirmed 3 of its buses were hit by petrol bombs in Nyanga this morning. No one was hurt. The drivers and the passengers were able to escape. The 3 buses have now been completely destroyed. Councillor J.P. Smith is the member of the Mayoral Committee for Safety and Security in Cape Town. Councillor Smith, good afternoon to you. What happened? How did this attack take place?
Good afternoon. This attacks followed a couple of hours after we did an enforcement operation in the area. Communities and community organizations regularly request us to improve the state of enforcement, particularly against the sedan taxis. And this morning was one such operation. And a short while after that, the attacks on these buses started. It has become a pattern that when enforcement takes place, particularly the sedan taxi industry reciprocates by attacking public infrastructure and other public transport vehicles. So we roll out additional enforcement in anticipation thereof, but unfortunately the offence is a highly mobile one. It's opportunistic attacks with a petrol bomb hurled from a vehicle, so particularly cowardly. And that was again the case this morning for, I understand, 4 Golden Arrow buses and one of our own city urban mobility trucks.
There's a huge context to this. There have been attacks like this on buses in the Eastern Cape. The companies actually told Parliament this week that they blame the taxi industry. In fact, an Eastern Cape MEC told them to pay money to the taxi industry. We've seen attacks on trains in Cape Town too in the past. Within that context, Councillor Smith, I mean, what is happening here, do you think? I mean, who's involved? Is it the taxi industry?
So if you haven't arrested somebody, you can't definitively prove that it is linked to the taxi industry. But considering the context, I'd be very surprised if it wasn't. And remember that in the case of the trains, we did actually catch someone, and that person's testimony made it clear that the person's actions was funded and driven by elements within the public transport sector, specifically the minibus taxis. And it is most likely that this is the case here too, that opportunities like this are used as excuses or opportunities to diminish the competition for public transport. And unfortunately, this kind of thuggery is endemic in components of the public transport sector, including other criminal practices like extortion, where people's vehicles are, in quotes, impounded, which is a criminal offense. It's hijacking. And then payment is demanded before the vehicle is released, or assassinations, which if you read the research on it is quite endemic, and where in fact this particular industry drives much of the assassination industry in South Africa.
It's absolutely vital to millions of people that there be proper, safe, efficient, reliable public transport. Councillor, I don't know what you do next. I mean, do we need police escorts for buses?
So that's the problem. We're already at that point. We have to escort our own My City buses to some extent, particularly in certain areas. We have a joint venture with Golden Arrow where we support them and respond to incidents on their buses. So we have a very close working partnership with them. And at one point, we even had uniformed staff members on their buses. So we're working closely with them and SAPS to try and curtail the attacks on their buses, where there are robberies on the buses. And then we are obviously also trying to work with the trains. We've had discussions with PRASA recently about returning the rail enforcement unit from the city to try and support the protection of their rolling stock and their stations and the commuters. So there is a major problem with this industry, and the comparatively low level of regulation and the failure to have effective crime intelligence and effective investigations and prosecutions of these murders. If you look at the assassinations in this industry over the last 2 decades in the city, I think I'm told that there was one, or maybe not even one, out of the, I don't know how many, 30, 40 assassinations where, in fact, some kind of prosecution took place. So there is a general failure of the criminal justice system to hold the thugs who drive this, the murderers who drive this, the syndicates who drive this, to hold them responsible and accountable. And that's a major problem. That's why we do these enforcement operations like we did this morning in Nyanga, precisely to try and make sure that where you have criminals who are sitting on sedan taxis, preying on victims and robbing them in the taxi, that's precisely why we do this kind of enforcement operation. And equally that we recently passed a traffic bylaw to allow us to impound vehicles when they engage in offences, as opposed to issuing them with fines or notices, which they are highly skilled at not paying.
Councillor J.P. Smith from the City of Cape Town, thank you very much indeed. An important story there.